Nick Mason tapped away at his keyboard in his small office on the fifth floor of Caldwell Frontier Capital. The room smelled of morning coffee and fresh ink from the stack of brochures for a new investment fund on his desk. He was finishing a press release about the company's recent successful exit from a startup, choosing every word with care and precision. His job in the venture capital firm's public relations department meant constant attention to detail and the need to embellish his boss's accomplishments without outright lying a fine line he had learned to walk. Nick, Harry Caldwell, CEO and founder of Caldwell Frontier Capital, called from the doorway so sharply that Nick flinched, nearly spilling the rest of his coffee on his keyboard. He quickly rose to his feet. Harry Caldwell stood in the doorway, a tall, confident man of about 50 with graying temples. He always wore expensive suits and was now dressed in a dark blue jacket and a light shirt without a tie, the signature style of a successful investor who combined business-like manners with ostentatious relaxation. "Good morning, Harry," Nick said politely, pushing back his chair. "How can I help you?" Harry walked in uninvited, not even trying to smile. He never bothered to be friendly with his subordinates, preferring to keep everyone on a short leash. Nick knew this and tried to avoid being seen by his boss unnecessarily. "There's a charity dinner at the Bluffton Museum tonight," Harry began without preamble. He glanced quickly at Nick's desk, lingering on the press release. "Are you almost done with our exit tech release?" "Yeah, almost ready," Nick nodded, straightening up. "We just need to agree on a couple of quotes with the startup founders, and then we can release it." Harry waved his hand as if shooing away an annoying fly. "Great. Ask Karen to finish it for you. You'll have another assignment." Nick raised his eyebrows in surprise. Karen was his colleague, also a PR manager. It was unusual to hand over your work to her. Usually everyone was busy with their own projects. However, there was no point in arguing with Harry. He was famous for his hot temper and intolerance of objections. "Okay," Nick answered cautiously. "What needs to be done?" Harry finally deigned to smile, but this smile seemed insincere and cold to Nick. The chief put his hands in his trouser pockets and said slowly, "You'll go to that dinner for me tonight. Accompany my wife." Nick stared at his boss for a few seconds, trying to process what he had just heard. Accompany his wife? Lily Brooks was known to everyone at Caldwell Frontier Capital, an attractive young woman who occasionally dropped by her husband's office or showed up at corporate events. But why? Harry continued, without waiting for Nick's reaction. "I have to be in Dallas myself for a meeting with investors, a very important deal." He said it casually, but there was a hint of irritation in his eyes. "It's not right for Lily to show up there alone, and she can't cancel her attendance. She's the face of the company at these balls, so to speak." Nick felt a sickening, sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. This was far beyond his usual job description. Accompanying his boss's wife to an event was that a PR manager's job description. On the other hand, orders were orders. "Of course, if necessary, I'll go," he said in a neutral tone, trying to hide his confusion. "What time and where should I meet Mrs. Brooks?" 7 o'clock tonight in the lobby of the Four Seasons. She'll be there waiting," Harry said curtly, turning to leave. "The car will be there. You just have to be there to represent the company if anyone asks. Smile, make sure everything goes smoothly. Any questions?" "No, Harry. I understand everything." Harry had already stepped over the threshold, but then suddenly turned around. His gaze pierced Nick so that a chill ran down his spine. "And no photos in the press, okay?" he said quietly but clearly. "No need for unnecessary gossip." "Of course," Nick answered quickly. Harry nodded and left, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and a tense silence. Nick slowly sank into a chair, feeling his heart beat a little faster than usual. What a task. He pictured Lily Brooks, the smiling, brown-eyed blonde he'd seen a few times in the office brochure and once briefly at a company party. She was about his age, in her mid-20s, and always looked elegant and aloof. Nick had barely spoken to her before, other than exchanging a few pleasantries when they met. and today he has to spend the whole evening with her at a charity dinner instead of her husband. Nick sighed and rubbed his face with his hands. He felt uneasy. On the one hand, such an assignment could mean trust from the boss, but on the other hand, it looked strange and even risky. If one of the journalists caught a shot where Lily was next to not her husband, but an unknown young man, rumors could start. However, Harry must have already thought about it, since he mentioned the photos. He will probably ask Nick for a detailed report after the event. It's okay, I'll manage, Nick tried to cheer himself up mentally. The main thing was to behave professionally, observe subordination, and not give reason for gossip. First of all, it was work. He picked up his phone and started typing a message to Karen to pick up the press release. The keys wobbled under his fingers for a moment, probably due to the nervous tension and suddenness of the assignment. Putting the phone down, Nick stood up and went to the window. The window overlooked downtown Austin. The morning sun illuminated the high-rises and the park along the Colorado River. Usually the view calmed him, but now his mind was racing with unsettling thoughts. Why didn't Harry really want to go with his wife? The investor meeting might be a good reason, but Nick had overheard that dinners like this meant a lot to Mrs. Caldwell. She was active in charity circles. It would be strange for her husband to ignore such an event without a good reason. None of my business, Nick snapped. He was just an employee who had been assigned to temporarily act as an escort. The rest was the boss's personal business, which he should not meddle in. The whole day until the evening flew by in a whirlwind. Nick had prepared everything he needed. He had clarified the details of the event, the dress code, a tuxedo, of course, and ironed his best suit at home. Several times I caught myself thinking about Lily. I wonder what I should talk to her about all evening. Perhaps she is reserved and cold, in which case the task is simply reduced to the function of a bodyguard companion. Or maybe she will turn out to be a pleasant conversationalist. By 6 o'clock in the evening, Nick had left the office and caught a taxi to his home in the city center. He had only a couple of hours to get himself together. While the car was weaving in the traffic, he managed to call Karen, make sure that she had sent out the press release without him, and get a portion of curious questions from her. Is it true that Caldwell himself assigned you to accompany his wife? It's so unusual. Nick got off with a joke, but inside, the anxiety only grew. At home, he quickly took a shower, shaved off his day's stubble, and put on a fresh shirt. He decided not to wear a narrow black tie in order to look a little less formal. After all, he was not Lily's husband, but only a representative of the company. As a result, a slender young man with short, cropped dark blonde hair in an elegant dark gray suit looked at him in front of the mirror. In his eyes, however, anxiety was noticeable. "Everything will be fine," Nick said quietly to himself and tried to smile at the reflection. The smile came out strained. He sighed, took the keys, and headed downstairs, where a taxi he had ordered through the app was already waiting for him. The Four Seasons Hotel was on the shores of Lady Bird Lake, not far from the business district. Guests in evening attire were milling about at the entrance to the lobby, many apparently heading to the same charity dinner. Nick paid the driver and got out, his palms slightly damp with excitement. He saw Lily immediately. She was standing by a tall marble column in the center of the hall, looking around slightly. She was wearing an emerald green floor-length dress that emphasized her slender figure and a silver cape over her shoulders. Her wavy blonde hair was styled in an elegant updo, and a thin necklace glittered around her neck. Nick froze for a second, struck by her appearance. The photograph did not convey even half of her presence. Lily seemed refined and a little sad. He quickly pulled himself together and walked over, trying to look confident. "Good evening, Mrs. Brooks," he said softly when the distance was reduced to a few steps. Lily turned around and immediately smiled, recognizing him. Her eyes sparkled warmly. "Oh, Nick, please call me Lily," she said. Her voice was low and genuinely welcoming. "I'm glad it's you. Harry said he'd send someone from the group, but he didn't say who." "I have been given the honor of accompanying you," Nick replied, feeling his tension ease a little at Lily's friendly tone. "How are you?" Lily shrugged slightly, her gaze sliding somewhere past to where couples of guests were walking towards the banquet hall. Well, it would be weird to complain, wouldn't it? She replied with a slight smile. I just feel a little bad that Harry couldn't be there. He's very sorry, Nick said automatically what he was supposed to say. It sounded perhaps too formal, and he hastened to add more sincerely, but I'll try to make the evening easy for you. Lily nodded gratefully. They were silent for a few moments, then she suggested, well, shall we go? I don't think we should keep the organizers waiting. We were supposed to be introduced to one of the sponsor couples of the evening. Nick politely offered her his hand, and Lily, after a moment's hesitation, accepted the gesture. He felt the light touch of her palm on his forearm and caught the scent of her perfume, a delicate floral scent, not at all heavy. Have you been to an event like this before? Lily asked quietly as they walked through the hall to the stairs that led down to the banquet hall of the museum attached to the hotel. I've had to accompany the team to similar meetings with partners a couple of times, Nick replied. But this is the first time I've done a charity ball. Usually my role is more behind the scenes, press releases, communicating with journalists. So you'll be coming out from behind the scenes today, Lily said with gentle humor. I hope you won't be too bored. Nick smiled a little more freely. I think it will definitely not be boring with your company. He was surprised by his own boldness. The phrase sounded almost like a compliment. However, Lily took it calmly, only the corners of her lips trembled slightly, and she did not answer, but approval flashed in her eyes. They entered the room, where soft jazz was playing and Austin's social elite was beginning to gather. A long evening lay ahead, which promised to be a test for Nick in a completely new role. The benefit dinner was a lavish affair. Several hundred guests gathered in the museum's spacious hall, decorated with floral arrangements and paintings by local artists. Among them were influential businessmen, city politicians, philanthropists, and Austin artists. Tuxedos and evening gowns flashed everywhere, and glasses of champagne clinked. Nick and Lily moved down the row of round tables, greeting people she knew. Lily carried herself with the confidence of a hostess. She smiled at the guests, exchanged a few words about the weather or the latest news, all the while keeping a light, almost imperceptible touch on Nick's elbow. Nick admired her ability to make conversation with almost everyone who approached her. He remained silent, only occasionally offering a polite hello when Lily introduced him. This is Nick Mason, representing Caldwell Frontier Capital today in Harry's place. At the mention of Harry, surprise flashed across the faces of some of the interlocutors, but they all quickly hid it with a friendly smile. Nick noticed how Lily's expression changed with each such explanation, a barely perceptible shadow of embarrassment and annoyance. An hour later, the ceremonial part of the dinner began. The guests sat down at tables. The host, a well-known radio host in the city, came up on stage and began to greet everyone on behalf of the museum's charitable foundation. Nick and Lily were sitting at one of the central tables along with several other couples of sponsors. To Lily's left was an elderly couple involved in the oil business. To her right was a young startup entrepreneur with his girlfriend. Nick found himself next to the startup entrepreneur himself, and while speeches were being made from the podium, he exchanged a few phrases with him about technology and investments. Lily sat a little distant, keeping a friendly expression on her face, but Nick sensed that her thoughts were elsewhere. He noticed her occasionally stealing glances at her phone, lying next to her glass of water. The phone wasn't ringing. Dinner was soon served, a gourmet meal that Nick didn't even immediately realize was what it was. Something with salmon and avocado sauce for an appetizer, a miniature steak with a side of vegetable mousse for the main course. He ate automatically, mostly watching the people around him and Lily. After the main part of the evening, a more informal part began. Guests began to move freely, talk, and some were already saying goodbye and leaving. The most resilient ones remained, usually those who especially liked desserts and dancing to live music. The orchestra began to play a slow jazz composition from the 1950s. The host announced, "We invite everyone to the dance floor to open the evening of dancing." Several couples came out to the middle of the hall. Lily turned to Nick and asked, slightly embarrassed, "Do you dance?" Uh, a little, Nick admitted. "I'm not a professional, I'm afraid." "Me too," she smiled that same sad smile. "But I really don't want to sit alone. Shall we dance?" Nick felt relieved that she had suggested it. He was afraid to impose himself, but he also couldn't leave her sitting alone when all the couples went to dance. "I'll be glad," he said sincerely. He stood up and gave her his hand. Lily, looking fragile and vulnerable at that moment, slowly stood up. They walked towards the dancers. Nick carefully placed his hand on her waist, and she placed her other hand in his palm. The distance between them remained more than decent, but Nick suddenly felt the closeness of her figure and again caught the scent of her perfume. The music flowed smoothly. Nick wasn't a great dancer, but he knew the basic steps of a slow dance. Lily moved easily with him, their movements quickly synchronizing. They were silent for a few moments, and Nick noticed that Lily's eyes were downcast, her mind clearly far away. He wanted to cheer her up somehow. After a couple of bars, he quietly asked, "Are you very tired today?" Lily looked up slightly. "A little. It's just." She was clearly choosing her words. "Every time at these parties, everyone asks where Harry is. I'm tired of making excuses." There was bitterness in her voice, although her words sounded calm. "I'm sorry," Nick said carefully. "I know it's unpleasant." Lily smiled bitterly. "I doubt you understand. You are young, probably never married." "No, I wasn't," Nick admitted. "You know, when you get married, you think you're going to be important to someone." She spoke quietly, and Nick had to lean closer to hear. "And then he always chooses work, or something else, over you." Nick glanced sideways at her. Lily's features remained calm, only her chin was slightly tense. He realized that this was the first time she had spoken to him about such a personal topic, and she had probably even forgotten herself, deciding that she was simply a neutral interlocutor, not a close family friend. "Harry is very dedicated to his work, it shows," Nick answered evasively. "Dedicated to his work." Lily shook her head. "Yeah, I guess." They moved in silence for a while. The music changed to a new melody, just as smooth. The couples around them were talking quietly or simply enjoying the dance. Nick decided to ask what was on the tip of his tongue. "Do you often attend such events alone?" Lily smiled sadly, not taking her eyes off the button on Nick's jacket. "Quite often, lately. Harry used to try to keep me company, especially when we first got married. Now, he always seems to have more important things to do." Nick didn't answer, but inside he felt sorry for her. He tried to imagine what it was like to be the wife of a rich, influential man, to live in luxury, but at the same time to feel abandoned. In society, Lily, of course, played the happy and wealthy lady. But now, in the dance, she allowed herself a little frankness. They continued dancing, and the conversation died down. A few minutes later, the song ended, replaced by a faster jazz number to which the younger guests immediately rushed. Lily gently released herself. "Thanks, Nick. I think I need some air." "Of course," he replied. "Would you like to go out into the garden? There seems to be an exit to the terrace here." Lily nodded her thanks as Nick led her to a side glass door that revealed an open patio with lanterns and a few small tables. It was a warm Texas night outside. The air was crisp from the recent lawn watering and smelled of grass and flowers. The noise of conversation and music died down as soon as the doors to the room closed. Lily took a few steps across the stone slabs of the courtyard and stopped at a low fence, behind which a view of Lady Bird Lake opened up, shimmering with the lights of the reflected city. Nick stood slightly behind her, respectfully giving her space. He noticed Lily take a deep breath, looking into the distance. For a moment he considered touching her shoulder in comfort, but he quickly dismissed the thought as unprofessional and risky. Instead, he asked, "Would you like some water or something to drink?" Lily turned around. "No, thank you, everything is fine. I'm just enjoying the silence." Nick came closer and stood next to her, leaning on the railing. For a while, they looked at the calm water of the lake in silence. "Austin is beautiful at night," Nick said quietly, breaking the silence. I moved here 5 years ago, and I still sometimes wonder how the city has changed. You're not from around here? Lily turned her head towards him with interest. I'm originally from San Antonio, but I studied and started working in California. Then I decided to come back to Texas, Nick explained. I was invited to Caldwell Frontier a year ago. I immediately accepted. You don't miss such chances. Lily smiled a little warmer. I understand. Harry, it must be admitted, is a talented investor. He knows how to attract good specialists. Nick didn't know what to say. He didn't want to praise Harry again, especially seeing Lily's mood. He remained silent, and another pause ensued, this time quite comfortable. Thank you for keeping me company today, Lily said suddenly, looking straight ahead. You've been a great help. I'm glad I could make this evening easier for you, Nick replied sincerely. I think everything went well. Lily chuckled softly. Thanks to you. If it weren't for you, I probably would have run away from here half an hour after it started. She looked at him, and Nick saw gratitude and weariness in her eyes. They looked at each other for a moment longer than necessary. Nick felt a strange warmth inside. He quickly looked away to the lights in the distance. It's probably late, Lily said quietly. I don't want to keep you up too late, Nick. What are you saying? That's my job, he objected. Besides, I enjoyed spending the evening with you. Me too, she responded softly. They went back inside, got Lily's things. Most of the guests were already leaving. Nick offered to drive Lily home. The Caldwell Frontier that had brought her had long since left, and Lily agreed to a taxi without objection. They barely spoke on the way. Lily looked out the window at the lights of the night city. Nick felt pleasantly tired, and at the same time a vague sense of anxiety. He liked spending time with her, perhaps too much for it to be just a work assignment. He dropped Lily off at a mansion in an upscale neighborhood surrounded by tall oak trees. Harry Caldwell's house looked dark. It looked like no one was home. Thank you again, Nick, Lily said, pausing for a moment before getting out of the car. You're very kind. Glad to help, Lily. Have a nice evening, or rather, night. Lily leaned over and gave him a surprisingly light peck on the cheek. It was more of a friendly gesture, but it caught Nick off guard. He felt the warmth of her lips on his skin for just a split second, but his cheek burned as if he had been electrocuted. Good night, she said quietly and slipped out of the car before he could answer. Nick sat there stunned for a few more seconds, then saw Lily head for the door, look back for a moment, and wave at him. He raised his hand in response. When her figure disappeared into the house, Nick exhaled, ran his hand over his face, and laughed nervously to himself. He definitely didn't expect this. Calm down, he thought. It's just gratitude. She's my boss's wife. Forget it. But it was hard to forget the feeling of a light kiss on his cheek. Even when the car was already racing along the highway back to the center, Nick kept touching with his fingers the place where the invisible mark remained. The next morning, Nick arrived at the office early, hoping to quietly get things done before the boss showed up. However, Harry Caldwell showed up unexpectedly quickly, looking cheerful and seemingly in a good mood. He walked through the open space with a victorious gait, throwing short nods to the employees who greeted him. Nick stood by the water cooler and watched as his boss disappeared into his office. Nick's inside sank. Harry would probably call him to report on the evening. Nick went over all the details of last night's dinner in his head, trying to anticipate what question his boss might ask and what to answer. A couple of minutes later, the office door swung open and the voice of the secretary, Mrs. Hopper, loudly announced, "Nick Mason, they're waiting for you." "Let's go," Nick thought, and trying to stay calm, went inside. Harry sat behind a huge oak desk, covered in papers and a tablet. An expensive watch gleamed on his wrist. He didn't even look up as Nick approached. "So, how did it go?" Harry asked, looking at something on the screen. "Excellent," Nick reported. "The event was well organized. Mrs. Brooks made a great impression on the guests." Harry chuckled briefly, finally looking at his subordinate. "She always makes an impression," he muttered. I'm wondering any hitches. The photos I warned you about, everything is clear. It seems that there were almost no journalists there, and those who were did not pay much attention to us, Nick reported. Harry's face showed satisfaction, and he nodded. Good. Well done. Nick allowed himself to exhale internally. Harry seemed pleased. He was about to leave, considering the conversation over, when Harry added, I'll have to stress you out like this a couple more times. Nick turned around. Harry leaned back in his chair, twirling a gold pen in his fingers. Ah, sure, no problem, Nick replied, trying to sound indifferent. I'm always ready to help if needed. Great. Harry leaned over his tablet again, taking notes. There's the TechVision Awards at the end of the month. We're sponsors, and they gave us a table. I was going to fly out, but there's a hitch. I'll be in New York on those days, so you'll be joining Lily again. Nick just nodded, a mixture of feelings inside him. Professionally, he was glad that his boss trusted him with something like this, and personally, he was glad for the upcoming opportunity to spend time with Lily, even though he knew it was risky to be glad about it. Of course, I'll organize everything, he assured. Anything else? Harry waved his hand, indicating that the conversation was over. Nick hurried out, closing the door behind him. Once in the corridor, he exhaled. The thought was spinning in his head. I'll have to strain myself a couple more times. It turned out that Harry was planning to regularly shift the role of Lily's companion to him. Well, at least it was better than his disfavor. During the day, Nick threw himself into his work, trying to distract himself from his personal worries. But closer to midday, he needed documents for one of Harry's press projects. The secretary said that Mr. Caldwell was in the office, and Nick headed for the office. Approaching the half-closed door, he heard Harry's voice. He was talking on the phone, and the tone was not at all businesslike, Nick noted with surprise. There were unusual soft notes in the boss's voice. Yeah, baby, I had a great time too. No, everything was perfect. You're so smart to book that corner. Haha, sure, next time we'll do it again. Nick froze, not believing his ears. Harry could only talk like that to someone very close, definitely not a business partner. Baby, we'll do it again next time. Nick's heart began to pound. He tried to step back so as not to overhear, but then there was movement in the office, and Nick didn't have time to move away. The door swung open, and Harry found himself face to face with Nick. The smile that had been on his boss's face a second ago instantly disappeared. His eyes narrowed. Why are you standing here? I'm sorry. Nick quickly forced the words out. I needed some documents on the VistaCorp project. You told me to bring them to you for signature. Harry stared at him for a few seconds, then nodded. Oh yeah, they're lying somewhere. He pretended not to notice the pause. Turning around, Harry walked to the table and picked up the folder. Nick noticed that there was a mobile phone on the table, the screen of which had not yet turned off. Harry covered the phone with the folder as if hiding it. Here, everything is signed. Nick took the folder, trying not to meet his boss's gaze. His throat was dry. Thank you, he muttered and turned towards the exit. And Nick? Harry's voice made him freeze on the threshold. Next time, knock, even if the door is open. Got it? Yes, of course, sorry, Nick quickly answered and left, carefully closing the door behind him. He paused in the hallway for a second, coming to his senses. His heart was still beating fast. He heard everything clearly. Harry was clearly not talking to an investor. Baby, next time. These words rang in his ears. So there was no important meeting with investors in Dallas yesterday. Harry most likely spent the evening and night with his mistress. Nick felt a lump in his throat. He felt sick both from what he had overheard and from the realization that Lily was essentially being deceived. Yes, Harry Caldwell owed him nothing, but Nick found it hard to accept the injustice. Lily had looked so sad yesterday, and her husband, meanwhile, was having fun with God knows who. Nick worked the rest of the day in a daze. He barely waited until evening before leaving the office. His head was in a mess. On the one hand, it was none of his business on the other. How could he look Lily in the eye now? Unable to come up with anything better, he headed to a bar near his home, where he sometimes went on Fridays. Today was Friday, a good day to have a drink or two and unwind. The bar was dimly lit, and a neon sign above the counter glowed with a bluish light. Longhorn Bar. Nick took a high stool at the counter and motioned for the bartender to come over. "Hello, as usual," the bartender said, recognizing the regular. "To begin with, yes, as usual," Nick sighed. His usual was a bottle of Texas light beer. He received the cold bottle and took a couple of sips. The bitterness of the beer was pleasantly sobering. "Hey, buddy," a familiar voice was heard behind him. Nick turned around. His friend Sam was walking towards him, a big smile on his face. Sam worked as a programmer at one of the companies Caldwell Frontier had once invested in. That's how they met. Sam raised his eyebrows at Nick's frown. "What's wrong with you? It's like the startup hasn't taken off all week." Nick grinned and shook his friend's hand. "Hi, Sam. It's just something that's been piling up." Sam sat down next to him and ordered himself a whiskey on the rocks. "Go on, tell me," he said, taking a sip. "I know you. You look like something happened." Nick hesitated. Sam had no connection to Caldwell Frontier. He wouldn't blab, but the subject was sensitive. "Just between us, okay?" Nick warned. "Of course, who should I tell?" Sam shrugged. Nick quietly told his friend about the strange assignment to accompany his boss's wife to an event. Without going into unnecessary details, he described the evening, how it went, how grateful Lily was, and how Harry now wanted him to accompany her in the future. Sam listened attentively, occasionally interjecting "wow" or shaking his head. "Well, well," he drawled when Nick had finished. "So your boss has essentially turned you into a platonic boyfriend for his wife?" "It seems so," Nick chuckled and took another sip of beer. "But the strangest thing is, I think I suspect why he needs it." "Well, that's to be expected," Sam shrugged. "The wife is busy, she doesn't complain, and in the meantime, he's free to do whatever he wants." Nick nodded gloomily. "Today, I accidentally overheard him talking on the phone to someone. Clearly not a business partner. He was in Dallas yesterday, not on business." Sam whistled softly, strongly. "Listen, does his wife know him?" "I don't think so," Nick sighed. She's a good girl, Sam. She's upset that he leaves her alone at all the parties, and it turns out he's even cheating on her." Nick's voice was filled with indignation, and he stopped short when he noticed his friend's mocking look. "You're taking things too seriously," Sam said. "Nick, don't fall in love by accident." Nick blushed sharply. "Oh, come on, what makes you think that?" Sam chuckled. "Well, I don't know. You tell her how good she is, and about your age, too, a pretty, rich lady in trouble, and you're a knight on a white horse. Classic, isn't it?" Nick winced. "This is nonsense. She is my boss's wife." "Oh, Nick," Sam drawled, patting him on the shoulder. "I warned you. It's a dangerous path. Only you decide what to do." Nick understood his friend's logic, but inside he was seething. Yes, he was increasingly filled with sympathy and compassion for Lily. But he wasn't going to cross the line. He simply couldn't allow anything inappropriate, otherwise he would lose his job and ruin her reputation. The friends talked a little more about less tense topics and drank. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, Nick, citing fatigue, went up to his house. Lying in bed, he tossed and turned for a long time. Lily's face on the balcony, her sad smile and grateful look, kept popping up before his eyes, and Harry's angry, satisfied face when he cleverly lied about meeting with investors. Nick himself didn't notice how he made a decision. Deep down, he firmly decided, if Harry continued to treat his wife like this, Nick would do everything so that Lily would not feel lonely. Even secretly, even just as a friend and support, but he would not allow her to suffer when he was there to help. With this thought, he fell into a restless sleep. Several weeks passed quickly. The relationship between Nick and Lily these days was limited to a few short phone calls and a couple of emails strictly on business. to discuss the details of the upcoming TechVision Awards ceremony where Caldwell Frontier Capital were supposed to be present as sponsors. Harry never personally called his wife in Nick's presence. He forwarded all organizational questions through his secretary or Nick himself. Finally, the day of the ceremony arrived. Nick met Lily again outside her mansion. This time, he arrived in the company's signature car, a black sedan with a driver, since the event was going to be big and the status required formality. Lily walked down the steps to meet Nick as he came out to help her into the car. Today, she was wearing an elegant navy blue knee-length dress, formal but graceful, with a gold brooch on her shoulder. Her hair was pulled back into a stylish bun. She smiled at Nick, warmly and a little shyly, it seemed. "Good evening, Nick," Lily said, settling into the back seat. "It's nice to see you." "Likewise, Lily," Nick responded, sitting down next to her. "Ready for another social outing?" She rolled her eyes slightly with a crooked smile. "Do you have a choice? But I feel calmer with you now, to be honest." These words warmed Nick's soul. The car moved towards the center, where the award ceremony was taking place in a large conference center. "How's Harry?" Lily asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "Have you spoken to him recently?" Nick hesitated for a moment. Of course, he had spoken to Harry, who had given him detailed instructions on how to present Lily, which people to introduce to her first, who to pay attention to. However, all these instructions could have been given by her husband himself, if he had been so inclined. "Yes, he mentioned that he was very sorry about his absence," Nick answered diplomatically. "He's in New York now, apparently holding some negotiations with potential investors for a new fund." Lily nodded but said nothing. She looked out the window. Nick could tell she was uncomfortable with the topic. They soon arrived at the venue. The carpeted area in front of the center was filled with photographers and journalists. Nick tensed up. There would be no escaping the cameras today. "Don't worry," he said quietly to Lily, getting out of the car and offering her his hand. "We'll just smile and move on." Lily nodded gratefully and stepped out of the car, immediately assuming a confident posture. They walked down the path together. Camera flashes blazed, reporters shouted out names. Lily was in good spirits. She waved with a smile, answered neutral questions like, "How are you?" Nick walked slightly to the side, trying not to draw attention to himself. A couple of times he heard one of the photographers ask, "Lily, where's Harry?" But Lily just continued to smile and pretend she hadn't heard. Inside, the conference center's gleaming ballroom had the feel of a high-tech party. Holographic installations, tables with digital signage, screens with TechVision Awards logos everywhere. Nick immediately spotted several well-known faces from Austin's tech sector, as well as colleagues from other venture firms. He and Lily took their seats at a table reserved for Caldwell Frontier, alongside representatives from a partner company, the young CEO of an award-winning startup and his team, and a senior official from the city's economic council. While the official part was going on awarding the best startups of the year, thanking investors, Nick and Lily exchanged only short remarks, mostly out of necessity, to exchange a few words with neighbors, to clink glasses of champagne during toasts. Nick felt that Lily was tense. Of course, so much attention, and next to her, instead of her husband, there was a stranger. Once the ceremony was over and the reception began, the tension eased a bit. Lily went off to talk to a couple of businesswomen she knew near the stage, and Nick was left alone. Armed with a glass of soft drink, he decided not to drink, staying at work. Then one of his colleagues approached him, Peter Hall, a PR specialist at another venture company, with whom Nick sometimes crossed paths at events. "Hey, Nick," Peter smiled, shaking his hand. "Listen, is your boss really in New York? I think I saw him yesterday here in Austin." Nick tensed up. "In Austin? Must have been mistaken. He should definitely be in New York today." Peter shrugged. "Maybe I was mistaken. Although the guy looked very similar. He was having dinner at the Stellar restaurant late in the evening, and it seems he wasn't alone, but with some younger blonde. I was surprised. It seems Mrs. Caldwell is a brunette, right?" Nick felt a chill run down his spine. He gave a tight smile. Peter, I don't know such details. Maybe it was someone else. No problem, I just shared. Peter took a sip of wine. Listen, you're a good boy, by the way. Accompanying the boss's wife, not every PR service would trust an employee with that. Thank you, I'm trying, Nick answered evasively. Peter nodded and, waving goodbye, disappeared into the crowd. Nick gripped his glass so tightly that his knuckles turned white. That meant Harry might not have even left for New York on time if he had been spotted in a restaurant with some blonde yesterday. Anger was seething in his soul. He glanced at Lily, who was just heading back toward him when she was stopped by an elderly woman with gray hair. Mrs. Ellerby, Nick remembered, a well-known philanthropist. Lily was chatting pleasantly to her. Nick was close enough to hear their conversation. Yes, thank you, Lily. You did such a wonderful job organizing that exhibition last month, Mrs. Ellerby was saying. By the way, it's a pity that Harry couldn't come again. And I was in Dallas a couple of days ago and saw him completely by chance. Lily raised her eyebrows. Really? He mentioned that he was there for negotiations. Oh, really? Ellerby continued good-naturedly. You know, I was surprised that he wasn't dining alone, but with some young lady. At first I thought maybe a niece or a relative. But then I decided not to go up to him, just in case. Just say hello to him when you speak. Of course, Lily squeezed out with a strained smile. Mrs. Ellerby left, and Lily stood frozen in place, as if trying to digest what she had just heard. Nick saw her look down and bite her lip. He wanted to go over and interrupt to distract her. He approached softly. Lily, is everything okay? She started, as if waking up, and looked at him. Her face still had a polite smile, but her eyes were sad, like a child who had been deceived. Yes, Nick, it's okay, she answered quietly. It's just nothing. Nick realized that here, among people, she would not say anything frank. He quietly suggested, Do you want to go out for a minute? There's a terrace here, too. Lily nodded, looking at him gratefully. They left the noisy hall and went out a side door onto an open area festooned with lights. Austin at night lay below, its lights shining along the river. Lily hugged herself, even though the evening was warm. This is all nonsense, she said suddenly, more to herself than to Nick. That woman in Dallas must have gotten something mixed up. Nick was silent. He felt excruciatingly sorry for her. But Harry was in Dallas at the time, Lily continued, her voice shaking. Why would he have dinner with some young lady? Who could that possibly be? The last question hung in the air. Lily finally looked at Nick, as if hoping he would deny her suspicions. Nick sighed quietly. Lily, I don't know. Maybe it's a business partner. I don't want to believe the worst without proof. He deliberately didn't tell about the conversation he'd overheard or Peter's words. Not now. Lily was already on edge. Yes, I guess, she muttered. She moved closer to the parapet, looking down. Nick stood next to her. Suddenly, Lily asked quietly, without turning her head, Nick, and you're still young. There are probably a lot of girls around. Have you ever cheated on someone? Nick was taken aback by the unexpectedness of the question. No, of course not, he answered sincerely. I can't do that. If you need a person, why cheat? And if you don't need him, then it's better to break up honestly. Lily nodded, continuing to look into the distance. You're right. I'm probably just winding myself up. It's just unpleasant to even admit the thought. There was pain in her voice that she was trying to hide. Nick, without thinking, gently covered her palm with his hand, which was lying on the parapet. Sorry, he immediately caught himself and removed his hand. I didn't mean to. But Lily didn't pull away. Instead, she turned to face him. Tears glistened in her eyes, and she desperately tried not to let them fall. Everything is fine, she whispered. For a few seconds they stood close, looking into each other's eyes. Nick felt his heart pounding. He knew that this moment was dangerously close to the line that could not be crossed. He wanted so badly to hug her, to tell her that everything would be okay. He took a half step closer, but the door behind them suddenly opened and laughing guests poured out onto the landing, thirsty for fresh air. Nick and Lily pulled away from each other at the same time. The moment was lost. "We should probably go," Lily said quietly, wiping the corners of her eyes while the new visitors to the terrace weren't looking. "Yes, of course," Nick agreed. They went back inside. Lily excused herself from her friends, citing fatigue, and Nick called a car earlier than planned. On the way, Lily was silent. Nick also sat tensely, not knowing what to say. When the car stopped at her house, Lily suddenly broke the silence. "Nick, thank you. You are the most reliable person I have known lately." Nick felt his throat tighten. He only answered quietly, "I'm always here if you need me." Lily nodded, opened the car door, and got out. She didn't kiss him goodbye this time, perhaps out of caution after the emotion that had nearly burst forth. But as she headed toward the house, she glanced back, and their eyes met. Lily tried to smile, then disappeared through the door. Nick stared at the dark porch for a long time before he told the driver to go. His soul was torn. He wanted to protect this woman from the pain that her own husband was causing her. A few days after the TechVision Awards, Nick got a call from Lily one Saturday night. He was just finishing up dinner at home, a simple pasta dish, when his phone rang. Seeing Lily Brooks's name on the screen, he quickly wiped his hands and answered. "Nick, hello. Sorry to bother you on a day off." Her soft voice came through the receiver. "Do you have a minute?" "Yes, of course," he responded immediately, sitting down on a chair. "What happened?" "Harry flew to Houston this morning for a conference," Lily began, clearly choosing her words carefully. "He asked me to sign some papers for a charity, and I'm not sure where to send them. The secretary at the office has already left, so I called Harry, but he seemed busy. Anyway, could you come by tomorrow morning? I know it's not exactly in the job description, but could you pick up these papers and drop them off at the office on Monday?" Nick held back a smile. The reason seemed a bit far-fetched. The documents could easily wait until Monday. But if Lily asked, he would come, of course. "Of course, Lily. I'll be there tomorrow morning, say around 10, if that's convenient." "Great," she said, clearly relieved. "Thank you very much, Nick. And sorry again to bother you." "It's not a worry, I'm glad to help," he assured her. The night passed restlessly. Nick kept waking up, thinking about the upcoming meeting. He understood that Lily was probably just worried about some issues that she could not discuss with her husband. Perhaps the conversation would turn to those rumors. He prepared himself to be just support, as he promised. Nick arrived at the Caldwell's house at the appointed time in the morning. He was wearing dark jeans and a white shirt, with a light jacket over it so as not to look too informal. Lily opened the door almost immediately after the bell rang. "Come in," she invited. The house was spacious and expensive inside, with high ceilings and light-colored decor. Nick had only been here once before, for the company Christmas party a year ago, when the entire mansion had been filled with guests. Now it was quiet and a little strange to see all this luxury without the crowds. Lily was dressed simply, light trousers and a light cream blouse. Without evening makeup, she looked younger and tired. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed a bad dream. They walked into the living room, where a stack of papers was already lying on the table. Lily motioned for Nick to sit down on the soft sofa and asked, "Do you want coffee? Tea? If it's not too much trouble, coffee, please." Nick nodded, realizing that the conversation would not start right away. While Lily was in the kitchen, he glanced at the paperwork. Nothing urgent reports and forms for the charity Lily oversaw. He smiled to himself. Really, all of this could wait until Monday. Lily returned with a tray, 2 mugs of coffee and a plate of cookies. "Well, I hope you don't mind some home-baked goods," she said with a slight smile. "Did you bake it yourself?" Nick was surprised, taking the mug. "I didn't expect you to have time for the kitchen." Lily sat down nearby at a short distance. "Sometimes, to distract myself, I cook something. It helps me not to think." Nick nodded. He took a sip. The coffee was strong and aromatic. There was silence for a few seconds. Finally, Lily, looking down at her cup, said, Nick, actually, I wanted to talk. Not just about papers. Nick put down his mug, his whole appearance expressing attention. Of course, I'm listening to you. Lily sighed, fiddling with the hem of her blouse. Remember that woman at the ceremony, Mrs. Ellerby, and what she said? I, I tried to discuss it with Harry the next day. Nick's heart sank. There it was. And what did he say? He asked quietly. He got mad, said Ellerby was an old gossip, that I was making it up. Lily's voice was bitter. He said he had actually had a business dinner with a young foundation employee from Dallas, and that I was, quote, bristling over nothing. Nick clenched his fists, trying to keep his face calm. I don't know what to think, Lily continued, her voice shaking. Maybe he's right, and I'm wrong to be jealous of his every move. But I have a feeling that he's hiding something from me. Lily, Nick began slowly, your feelings are not unfounded. She looked up at him, her eyes large and sad. What do you mean? She whispered. Nick ran his hand over his knee, steeling himself. He didn't want to be the one to shatter the last illusions, but he couldn't lie either. I didn't want to say it because it's none of my business. He chose his words as carefully as possible. But I heard some things too. I don't want to throw around accusations without proof. It's just that maybe Harry does have someone. Lily turned pale. She put the cup down on the table, not noticing that she had spilled some coffee on the saucer. Someone, she echoed. Then I'm not going crazy. Tears glistened on her eyelashes. Nick couldn't resist and carefully covered her hand with his. I'm very sorry, he said quietly. Lily blinked away a tear. Don't apologize. It wasn't you. She trailed off and squeezed his hand tighter. Thank you for being honest. I've been lacking honesty for too long. Nick moved a little closer, to be close but not to overstep the boundaries. His heart sank at the sight of her pain. What are you going to do? He asked softly. Lily shook her head. I don't know. Pretend nothing is happening? Find out the truth to the end? But how? Hire a detective to follow your own husband. That's awful. She smiled bitterly through her tears. Sometimes it seems to me that I'm living someone else's life, as an outside observer. From the outside, Harry and I are perfect, a beautiful couple, a house, status. But inside there's emptiness. Nick decided to be bold. He very gently, encouragingly put his arm around Lily's shoulders. She shuddered slightly, but did not pull away. On the contrary, as if she was looking for support herself, Lily turned and buried her face in his shoulder. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have done this. It's okay, Nick whispered back. You don't need to apologize. He could feel her soft hair against his chin, hear her trying to hold back quiet sobs. Nick stroked her back gently, trying to give her a sense of security. His heart was pounding, but he was only thinking about her now. A few minutes passed. Lily calmed down a little and, realizing that she was literally pressed against Nick, embarrassedly tried to move away. Sorry, I'm completely at loose ends. Nick didn't let go right away. He looked into her eyes. There were wet tracks of tears on Lily's cheeks. He suddenly had a strong desire to kiss them, to wipe the pain from her face. This desire was frighteningly strong. Lily met his gaze, her fingers still clinging to the lapel of his jacket. There were only a few inches between their faces. Nick leaned forward, just a little, driven by impulse, and felt her breath. Lily didn't move, only closed her eyes. And suddenly, somewhere in the house, a telephone rang loudly. They both shuddered and pulled away from each other, as if they had been doused with cold water. Lily quickly ran her hands over her face, shaking away the remaining tears. Excuse me, it's probably... She stood up, heading towards the phone standing on the nightstand in the hallway. Nick ran his hand over his face, trying to calm his racing heart. Just a little more, and he would kiss her. And then, he closed his eyes, scolding himself. It would be a disaster. Or would it? But there was no time to think about that now. Lily returned a minute later, holding a cordless handset. It's Harry, she said quietly. I I have to answer. Nick nodded, standing up. Certainly. Lily pressed the button and spoke. Hi, dear. Yes, Nick stopped by. I signed as you asked. Yes, he's doing well. Nick turned away, giving her some semblance of privacy, but he couldn't help but hear every word. Lily's tone changed abruptly. She spoke in a muffled voice, trying to sound calm. Nick could detect the bitterness in her voice that she carefully concealed. When will you be back? Oh, I see. No, nothing new. Sure, rest after the flight. Yeah, bye. She hung up and stood there for a few seconds, clutching the receiver. Nick shifted awkwardly from one foot to the other. Lily looked at him apologetically. I'm sorry it happened this way. It's okay, Nick replied softly. I understand. He leaned over to the table and collected the documents he had come for. Lily walked him to the door. Before opening it, she said quietly, Thank you for coming and listening. Nick smiled at her encouragingly. You know where to find me if you need anything. Lily suddenly stepped forward and hugged him tightly. This time it was her impulse, a brief but trusting gesture. Nick hugged back, feeling her press against him for a moment. Then Lily stepped back and opened the door, the smile on her face grateful, although her eyes remained sad. Have a nice day, Nick. And to you too, Lily. As the door closed behind him, Nick exhaled, feeling both joy at the closeness that had emerged between them and anxiety. The line had almost been crossed today. He knew there was no turning back now. His feelings for her were becoming too strong to deny. A couple of days after that fateful night, Nick woke up before his alarm. Lily was asleep next to him, wrapped in a blanket. Her face looked peaceful, as if all his worries had retreated, if only for a little while. Nick lay there, enjoying the warmth of her nearness and watching the first rays of sunlight break through the curtains. But there was much to do. They had a plan, and they needed to act. Carefully, so as not to wake Lily, Nick got out of bed. He quietly got dressed and went to the kitchen, made coffee. As the aroma spread through the apartment, Lily looked out of the bedroom, wrapped in a sheet and slightly disheveled, but no less beautiful. Good morning, Nick smiled, handing her a mug. How are you? Lily came over, took the coffee, and, standing on tiptoe, kissed him tenderly on the lips. Good. I haven't slept this well in a long time. Nick happily felt the warmth of her kiss. They had breakfast together, talking in low voices, as if afraid to disturb the morning calm. Then Lily, looking at her watch, sighed. I need to get home before Harry calls with questions. Nick nodded, understanding. Despite their closeness, they still had to hide. I'll take you, he offered. No need, Lily shook her head. I'll call a car, it's safer. She disappeared into the bedroom to get dressed, and Nick typed a message to Sam on his phone. I have something to talk about. I really need a good private detective. Urgently. I'll explain later. Sam responded almost instantly. Wow. Okay, I know someone who used to be a cop. Now he's a private trader. Very reliable. Should I give him his contact information? Nick. Yes, I would appreciate it, but confidentially. Sam sent a number signed Frank Miller, Private Detective. Nick kept the contact. When Lily was ready and the taxi pulled up, they hugged goodbye in the hallway. Lily looked into his eyes. Thank you. For everything. This is just the beginning, Nick replied softly. We'll get through this. Lily left, and Nick immediately dialed the detective's number. Frank Miller replied in a gruff bass voice. Miller listening. Nick briefly explained that he needed a confidential investigation of a personal nature, mentioned that Sam had shared the contact. It turned out that the detective remembered Sam as an IT specialist who had helped on an old case, and they agreed to meet at noon in a quiet diner on the outskirts to discuss the details. At the appointed time, Nick entered a nondescript cafe where a solidly built man of about 60, with gray hair and a keen gaze, sat at a distant table. He was wearing a worn leather jacket. Nick recognized him as Frank from Sam's description. Nick? The detective asked as Nick approached. Yes, hello, Mr. Miller. Call Frank. He extended his hand. Tell me what's going on. Nick sat down, motioned to the waitress not to come up to him again, and quietly stated the gist of it. He suspected that a certain man was cheating on his wife, and he needed proof photos, recordings, any evidence, and all confidentially. He didn't name names at first. Frank listened, frowning. This is not a new thing. I often take on such things. The goal is divorce, right? Probably yes, Nick nodded. I understand. Well, my condition is a floating rate, payment for a day's work plus a bonus if I get what I need, and I'll warn you right away, no one will give a 100% guarantee. We'll be fine with it, Nick assured. Money isn't a problem. Frank chuckled. Glad to hear it. Then the details. Who is the subject? Nick looked around. There was no one nearby. He lowered his voice. Harry Caldwell. Frank's eyebrows twitched upward. The same one? A big fish. So his wife is Lily Brooks? Yes, Nick confirmed. The detective nodded. I've heard of them. Well, interesting. My gut feeling tells me it's a typical case. A rich guy on the loose. Okay, what's on it? Schedule, habits? Nick told everything he knew. Harry often goes on business trips, usually for 1-2 days. He visits Dallas, Houston, sometimes New York. There are no specific names of mistresses, but, judging by the rumors, there may be an old flame in Austin, and maybe someone else on the side. I think the easiest place to start would be here in Austin, Frank said thoughtfully, making notes. Next time he says he's going on business, have my wife tell me the dates and where, if she knows. Good. And one more thing. Recently, one of my friends saw him in the restaurant Stellar with a young blonde. It was the day when he told everyone that he was in New York, but in fact he was in the city. Frank chuckled. They often relax on home turf, thinking no one will notice. I'll check Stellar. They discussed a few more things. Frank asked for a photo of Harry and, if any, of his supposed mistress. It was easier with a photo of his wife. Nick gave one of their photos together from an online article, where Harry was with some girl at a charity event 6 months ago, some assistant. Lily suspected that girl, but she wasn't sure. Frank took the image just in case. I'll start today. I think we'll keep an eye on him. I have an assistant, a very inconspicuous guy. Frank stood up, making it clear that the meeting was over. I'm in touch with you via a secure channel. He nodded at the messenger on his phone. And tell the missus to be on the alert. As soon as her husband says, meeting again, let her know. Nick paid for both of their coffees and shook the detective's hand. Thank you, Frank. We are counting on you very much. I'll do what I can, boy, he answered seriously. Take care of her. It's obvious you're worried. Nick left the cafe with relief. Things were moving forward. That evening, he and Lily met again at his house. Lily told him that Harry was planning a trip to San Francisco the following week, supposedly for a conference. She had already given Frank the dates. They sat on the living room floor, papers spread out on the table. Lily had brought bank statements and bills for the past months, which she had managed to copy unnoticed from her husband's home office. She decided to look for financial leads at the same time. Look, she pointed out, regular cash withdrawals, large sums, always before his business trips, and payment for some luxury travel agency. I've never even heard of such a thing. Maybe he used this agency to arrange trips for himself and someone else, Nick suggested, feeling an unpleasant chill. Lily nodded sadly. Very similar. Nick took her hand. We will collect all this, and soon we will know the truth. Lily ran her hand over her face, trying to calm the emotions that were flooding her. I thought I would cry when I found out the truth, but it was as if all my tears had dried up. All that was left was anger, and relief that now I know for sure. Nick gently placed his hand on her shoulder. You are very strong. Not everyone could have endured all this. Lily shook her head. Strong? I'm not sure. It's like everything inside is burned out. She paused, then asked quietly, Nick, and you don't blame me? For the fact that I, too, was unfaithful to Harry? Of course not, he answered quickly. You decided to leave him before anything happened between us. And then, after everything he's done, he has no right to your loyalty. Lily smiled sadly. You're probably right. But part of me still feels guilty. Upbringing, morals. It's hard to get rid of it right away. Time will put everything in order, Nick assured softly. It won't be long before you realize that you shouldn't blame yourself for anything. Lily looked at him gratefully. Thank you. You always know what to say. She squeezed his hand on her shoulder. For a while, they just sat there in silence, while the storm in Lily's soul gradually died down. Finally, she exhaled. Well, we know the truth. Now we need to put it to use. Lily brushed away a tear and took Nick's hand in hers. Thank you for telling me everything honestly. I've been lied to for too long. And soon we'll find out the truth, no matter what he's hiding, Nick repeated. Lily suddenly spoke, clasping her fingers on her knees. I thought we were just having a crisis in our relationship, but it turns out it was much worse. Nick listened in silence. Lily ran her hand over her face. I thought he was just too caught up in his work, but his voice broke. Nick stroked her hand, not knowing what to say without hurting her more. Lily straightened up, her eyes flashing with new determination. I don't want to guess and suffer anymore. I want to know everything to the end. We'll find out, Nick promised firmly. Lily squeezed his fingers. The main thing is that we are together. Otherwise, I wouldn't have decided. A week later, Frank Miller was already working hard. Harry Caldwell had indeed gone on a business trip to a conference in San Francisco, as he told Lily. In fact, as the detective found out, the conference was just a cover for one day, and Harry spent 2 more days alone. Late Friday evening, Nick received a message from Frank. I have what you need. We'll meet tomorrow morning. The message came with one photograph, a blurry shot taken from inside a car. Harry Caldwell was walking out the front door of a San Francisco hotel with his arm around the waist of a slender blonde. Nick's teeth clenched in anger, even though he saw nothing unexpected. He called Lily back and asked her to come to him in the morning. On Saturday at 10 o'clock, the detective arrived at Nick's house. Lily was already there. They met Frank together in the living room. The detective took several photographs and 2 sheets of printouts from a worn folder. Well, hold on, he boomed, laying the materials out on the table. Lily steeled herself and took the first pictures. They showed Harry sitting in a restaurant across from the same young woman whom Lily immediately recognized as Ashley, the former Caldwell Frontier assistant who had left 6 months earlier. Another photo showed Harry and Ashley kissing at a table, and a third showed them leaving the restaurant arm in arm. Lily leafed through the pictures silently, her lips pressed tightly together. Nick put his hand on her shoulder. That's not all, Frank sighed, holding out more photos. Here's San Francisco, the Pacific Bay Hotel. Your husband checked in under his own name and rented a suite for 3 nights, though he flew out a day early, apparently to get back from the conference. In the photos, Harry and Ashley were walking into the hotel together. Then, in another, they were walking out, Harry carrying a suitcase and Ashley just a small handbag, looking happy. I also checked that blonde, Ashley Rose. The detective looked at his notes. She used to work for him, right? After she quit, no official job, no business, but substantial sums of money regularly come into her account. I think it's clear from whom. Lily closed her eyes, pressing her hand to her mouth. Nick hugged her. Frank cleared his throat, putting the photographs aside. And the last thing here, he pointed to the printouts. Details of expenses. I talked to my former colleagues in the banking sector. Anyway, I found out everything was paid for by Caldwell Frontier Capital. Airfare, hotel, they were bought with Harry's corporate card. So, essentially, with the company's money. Nick exchanged a glance with Lily. There it was, both personal betrayal and fraud in relation to work. Are you sure? Nick asked, studying the transaction printouts. 90%. I have an informant in one bank. He couldn't officially issue a statement, but he confirmed the data. Frank nodded. Lily suddenly spoke, quietly but firmly. It's even worse than I thought. He uses investors' money, company money, for his own pleasures. She glanced at the photo of Harry kissing Ashley and dropped it back on the table. "Mrs. Brooks," Frank said softly, "I'm sorry it happened, but you asked for the truth." Lily managed to hold back her tears. She straightened up. "Thank you, Frank. You did a great job." She took out a pre-prepared envelope, the detective's fee, and handed it to him. He glanced inside, apparently making sure the amount was correct, and stood up, pulling his cap down. "Glad to help. If you need anything else, call me," Frank said. When he left, Lily seemed to lose her footing. Nick helped her sit down on the sofa. They were silent for a while. Lily stared at one point. "How are you?" Nick asked quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She looked at him, and her eyes flashed with anger through the moisture. "You know, it's strange. I don't feel pain anymore, just anger." "Not at her." Lily nodded at Ashley's photo. "At him. How dare he deceive me for so many years and also set up our company?" "You have every right to be angry," Nick said softly. Lily clenched her fists in her lap. "That's it. I've had enough. I'm filing for divorce." She pronounced the last words carefully. Nick nodded. "I will support you in everything." Lily looked at the pictures with disgust. "I want him to be punished not only for the marriage, for financial fraud, too. It's illegal to spend the foundation's money on that." "Yes, it is a scam," Nick confirmed. "The fund's board of directors will definitely be furious when they find out." Lily bit her lip thoughtfully. "We have to tell them. But how? Go straight and tell them. Then Harry will understand that it's from me, and he can deny everything, Dodge." Nick looked at the printouts. "We can do it anonymously. Send materials to the board, photos, transaction data, as a whistleblower, as an anonymous informant from the staff." Lily nodded slowly. "That's the idea. The main thing is that they believe it and start checking." "They'll start with evidence like that," Nick said confidently, collecting the papers. "We just need to draw everything up neatly." Lily brushed away a tear and took Nick's hand in hers. "Let's do it. I want to see his world crumble the way he did to mine." For the first time, Nick saw her so determined and even merciless. He was a little afraid of this fire, but he knew that Harry deserved it. They spent the rest of the day planning their next move. Lily contacted her divorce lawyer without revealing details yet, but warning that she would be filing paperwork. And Nick began drafting an anonymous letter to the Caldwell Frontier Capital Board and the fund's investment committee, compiling all the evidence into a dossier. The truth would come out soon. On Sunday night, Nick and Lily finished preparing an anonymous package for the Caldwell Frontier Capital Board. It included copies of the photographs obtained by the detective, transaction records showing the misuse of funds, and a detailed letter. The anonymous letter reported that one of the company's executives has been systematically using corporate resources for personal purposes, including paying for travel and entertainment with his mistress, attached evidence, and expressed hope that the board would investigate. To maintain anonymity, Nick created a new email account via VPN under a false name. They decided to send the materials not only to the personal addresses of the board members, but also to several key investors in the fund. This way, the chances of silence were reduced to zero. When everything was ready, already after midnight, Nick pressed the send button. The letters flew to their recipients. Lily, standing nearby, exhaled. Now there is no turning back. "And there's no need," Nick answered quietly, hugging her shoulders. "Are you ready for what's about to begin?" Lily closed her eyes. "Honestly, I don't know, but it's right." Nick kissed her temple. "I'm with you. We'll get through this together." The next day, Monday, Nick came into the office as if nothing had happened. Inside, he was shaking with anticipation. He was worried that the board might ignore the letter or that Harry would find out who was behind it. The morning dragged on painfully slowly. Harry Caldwell showed up at the office closer to noon, apparently deciding to start the day later after his flight. Nick noticed the boss walk past the open space to his office without even casting a glance in the direction of his subordinates. Harry's face was ordinary, self-confident. Looks like he doesn't know yet, Nick thought, feeling both relief and tension from what was to come. Around 1 p.m., word spread through the office. An emergency board meeting in the conference room on the 18th floor. Nick watched as Mrs. Hopper, the secretary, bustled to call Harry, then ran into his office with a worried expression. A few minutes later, Harry, gloomy but still in good spirits, walked quickly to the elevator. Behind him, the company's CFO trotted along, also puzzled. Nick's heart started pounding. It had begun. Colleagues whispered among themselves, wondering what had happened. Some suggested that a major deal had fallen through, others that there might have been problems with regulators. Nick sat silently at his computer, trying to look busy, although his thoughts were up there on the 18th floor. The board of directors met for several hours. Towards evening, the elevator doors opened and Nick, looking out of his cubicle, saw Harry coming out accompanied by two board members. Harry's face was purple, his jaw was clenched. He listened to the thin man, the chairman of the board, and seemed to be having difficulty containing his indignation. From the fragments of phrases carried through the hall, Nick caught. Forced to suspend pending investigation. Better voluntarily. And Harry's answer through clenched teeth. This is absurd. A lie. Harry headed towards his office, followed by the head of the legal department. Several employees exchanged wary glances. Nick, pretending to photocopy documents at the printer, found himself not far from the boss's office and heard muffled voices behind the door. It was difficult to distinguish the words, but there was no doubt that the conversation was in raised tones. About 15 minutes later, the door swung open. The lawyer came out first, his face extremely serious. Harry came out next. He was pale with rage. In his hand was a phone, which he immediately began calling someone. "Come to me immediately. Don't ask, just come," he said into the phone, walking past the frozen employees. Nick had never seen his boss in such a state. Harry didn't even look at anyone. He walked straight to the elevator and went down. Secretary Mrs. Hopper hurried after him, holding his briefcase. A tense silence fell over the office. Nick returned to his seat, trying to hide the trembling in his hands. He knew the plan had worked. Harry was suspended pending an investigation, effectively the first step to his downfall. Half an hour later, a notice was sent via corporate email to all employees. Until further notice, Vice President Mark Reynolds is acting CEO of Caldwell Frontier Capital. Mr. Caldwell is taking administrative leave. No further details were provided. The phones in the PR department where Nick worked were ringing off the hook. Journalists sensed a scandal. The head of the department, having learned about what had happened, gathered the team and gave instructions. No comments to the press, wait for the official position of the board. Nick carried out the instructions mechanically. A storm of emotions raged inside him. Triumph, fear, relief, concern for Lily. As the elevator closed behind Harry, the office gradually became animated with whispers. Several of the risk department employees, holding each other's elbows, slipped toward the coffee station, clearly wanting to discuss the matter away from their superiors. The PR department colleagues were also nervous. Karen, the same employee to whom Nick had once handed over his projects, approached him and asked quietly, "Nick, what's going on? Do you know anything?" Nick shook his head, maintaining a puzzled expression. "I didn't really understand it myself. It looks like something serious." The board of directors suddenly. "This is an emergency," Karen whispered, looking around. "Could it be related to—" She hesitated, choosing the right word, "Harry's behavior?" Nick feigned surprise. "Do you think it's personal?" "I don't know. Maybe some financial issues." Karen sighed. "They probably won't tell us anything directly. We'll wait for official news." Then the head of the PR department, Mrs. Raymond, approached them, holding a phone. She looked worried. "Team, I just got a directive from the council. No information is to be released to the press," she said sternly. "Any inquiries are to be forwarded to me. Is that clear?" The staff nodded in unison. Nick noticed that Mrs. Raymond's hands were shaking. Apparently, she had already received calls from irritated investors and journalists. Karen quietly returned to her seat. Nick sat down too, trying to concentrate on the computer screen. Inside, he was jubilant, but he carefully hid it under the mask of tension that was common to everyone around him. In the evening, when the workday was over, Nick left the building and immediately dialed Lily. She answered almost immediately. Well, her voice trembled with tension. They suspended him, Nick said quietly, stepping away from his colleagues as they left. They've temporarily appointed an acting officer. It's clear that there's an investigation going on. Lily breathed a sigh of relief on the other end. So, everything worked out. Yes, how are you? I filed for divorce this afternoon, she said after a pause. He probably doesn't know yet. He was busy with something else. But he'll find out soon. Nick imagined what Harry would feel like being hit from both sides at once, and for some reason, he wasn't moved by pity. Are you home now? He asked. Yes, I will come. Please, Lily replied barely audibly. Half an hour later, Nick was at her place. Lily opened the door, looking exhausted but resolute. They embraced wordlessly. Nick felt her trembling in his arms, but not from weakness, more from the strain of the day. Now all that remains is to wait, he said quietly, stroking her back. Yes, and be prepared for anything, Lily whispered. He's not one to give up without a fight. I can't imagine what's going through his head right now. That evening, they sat together for a long time on the couch in Lily's living room, hardly turning on the lights. Only the lights of the evening city filtered through the curtains. Nick held Lily's hand, and they said little, just sat there, processing what had happened. The storm had broken, but its epicenter was ahead. Harry Caldwell showed up at the mansion late one evening when Nick and Lily, after hours of heavy talking, were finally beginning to doze off on the couch. The front door swung open so hard that it hit the doorstop, making them both jump. Harry stood in the doorway, his face twisted with anger, his tie torn off, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He was clutching a piece of paper in his hand, probably a summons or a notice of divorce. He looked around the living room and immediately spotted Nick next to Lily. Harry's eyes narrowed. Of course, he said angrily. I thought so. Lily stood up, trying to look calm, although Nick could see how tense she was. Harry, we have nothing to talk about. You got the papers, I see. She nodded at the document in his hand. Everything is crystal clear. Harry slammed the door of the derriere behind him, throwing his briefcase on the floor. He stepped forward. Absolutely clear, he exploded. What exactly is clear, Lily? That my own wife stabbed me in the back. Nick stood up as well, but stayed slightly behind Lily, ready to intervene if it came to threats. You're not the one talking about knives in your back, Harry, Lily snapped, her voice icy. Years of lies and betrayal, what is that called? Harry snorted. Oh, so that's it. So you decided to get even. You staged this whole circus with the council. You talked your lover into. He threw an angry glance at Nick, collecting dirt on me. Lily took a step forward, looking at her husband with disdain. I didn't set up anything. You destroyed everything we had yourself. Or do you think that I will forever tolerate your business trips to the left? Harry blushed, but tried to smirk. Darling, you overestimate yourself. Yes, there were a couple of affairs, a trifle, but who gave you this luxurious house, the life that many dream of? Me. Lily laughed bitterly. A fancy house, a dream life. Are you serious? Harry, did you buy me? Do you think I was holding on to mansions and dresses? Didn't you? Harry grimaced. That's what you all want, wealth, status. I gave you all of that. And you repaid me with betrayal. Lily turned pale with anger. Betrayal? After you spent years sleeping with others behind my back. Watch your language, Harry hissed, coming closer. It's your own fault I was bored. You've become so insipid, always with your charity work. Lily raised her hand as if she had been slapped by his words. Nick couldn't take it anymore and stepped forward. Mr. Caldwell, that's enough. You better leave. Harry gave him a look full of hatred. Ah, Nick Mason. Nice work. So you're getting revenge on me for something. Think you're some kind of knight, huh? Sleeping with my wife behind my back, puppy? Nick felt a surge of adrenaline, but tried to speak evenly. Your problems didn't start with me, sir. You ruined everything yourself. Silence, Harry barked, and before Nick could react, he rushed forward, swinging. He hit Nick. Lily screamed. Harry, stop it. Harry seemed taken aback by what he had done, but anger washed over him again. He tried to lunge at Nick again, but Lily stepped between them, holding out her hands. Don't you dare touch him. Harry stopped, breathing heavily, his eyes darting between his wife and his former subordinate. So that's how it is. He finally squeezed out with a poisonous grin. So you're exchanging me for this boy? For an employee of my own PR department? How low you've fallen, Lily. Lily didn't back down. You're the only one who's fallen low, Harry. Who were you there with? Your own assistant. Isn't that low? Harry waved his hand. You don't understand anything about real life. You live in your dreams of fidelity. The world doesn't work that way. No, Harry, Lily shook her head. That's how your world works, and mine works differently. And now our paths are diverging. Harry chuckled coldly. Do you think it's that simple? A divorce, and you're free? No way. I won't give you a cent more. You signed a prenuptial agreement, remember. I'm not asking for anything, Lily snapped. I don't need anything from you. Harry narrowed his eyes. Let's see how you sing when you're left without money. This young lover of yours won't be able to support you for long. Nick wanted to answer something, but Lily suddenly laughed. The laugh was harsh. Money? Are you threatening me with money, Harry? Have you forgotten who I am? Harry's face darkened. What do you want to say? Lily stepped almost right up to him, looking straight into his eyes. My father left me a trust that owned part of Caldwell Frontier Capital. You remember very well. Without that money, your company would not have taken off in the first place. Do you think I'll give up my share after the divorce? No, Harry. I'll become an independent owner. And guess how my voting trust will vote at the meeting? Against you. Harry's face twitched. Apparently, he hadn't expected her to go all in and remember it now. You. He wanted to say something, but Lily had already moved away and pointed to the door. Go away, Harry. We have nothing more to talk about. All contacts are through lawyers. Harry glanced at Nick, who was standing slightly behind Lily, clutching his bruised chin but ready for another attack. It's not over yet, Harry said through gritted teeth, picking up his briefcase and heading for the exit. You'll be sorry, Lily. And you too, puppy. Get out of my house, Lily repeated firmly. Harry jerked the door open, stepped out into the night, and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. In the silence that followed his departure, the only sounds were Lily's heavy breathing and Nick's heartbeat, which he could feel in his ears. Lily turned to face him, her eyes shining with tears either of anger or relief. Nick wiped the corner of his split lip with the back of his hand. Are you okay? She didn't answer. She just rushed to him and hugged him tightly. Nick felt her shaking in his arms. It's all over, Lily whispered. Nick stroked her hair. Yes, now it's all over. He won't touch you anymore. Lily pulled back a little and carefully touched his chin with her fingertips, where a bruise was already forming. Oh my God, Nick. Are you in a lot of pain? Nick smiled through the pain. I'll survive. The main thing is that you're safe. They stood in the middle of the empty hall, holding each other. A difficult trial awaited them, divorce, public scandals, perhaps. But now the main thing is that they survived this fight. Thank you, Lily said quietly. I couldn't have done it without you. Nick shook his head. We are together. Now always. Lily pressed herself closer to him, and Nick realized she really was free, and he was too. There was nothing holding them back now. It had been a week since Harry Caldwell had been ousted from the company and Lily had filed for divorce. Things had moved quickly. A brief note appeared in the local business news. Prominent venture capitalist Harry Caldwell has stepped down as managing partner of Caldwell Frontier Capital due to personal circumstances. The details were not disclosed to the press, but in narrow circles everyone understood that a serious scandal was at stake. Nick continued to come into the office even though the atmosphere was tense. Vice President Mark Reynolds had taken over as interim CEO and was trying to keep any publicity down. Ironically, Nick found himself involved in drafting a press release about Caldwell's departure. He dryly stated that Mr. Caldwell had decided to devote time to personal projects and family, thanked him for his contributions, and added that the firm would continue to operate as usual under new leadership. Inside, Nick was barely suppressing a bitter chuckle at the lie, but that was the job of a PR man. Lily has not spoken publicly about the divorce. She has moved out of the mansion for a while to stay with a close friend, avoiding the spotlight. Fortunately, tabloid journalists have not yet caught wind of the family drama, focusing on Harry's figure and financial issues. One evening, Nick came home after a long day. The PR department was dealing with a flood of questions from partners and investors. Lily was waiting for him at the entrance. They had agreed to meet at his place. She looked tired, but calm. "Hey," Nick hugged her and felt the tension of the day ease away. "How are you holding up?" "Not bad," she tried to smile. "My lawyer spoke to his lawyers today. It looks like Harry is willing to sign a settlement to get the matter over with quickly." "Really?" Nick led Lily to the elevator. "So he gave up?" "I think he realized that his chances of fighting are slim," Lily shrugged. "The evidence is irrefutable, and the council is putting pressure on him. He's bargaining for terms, of course, but I want nothing from him except freedom." "And justice," Nick added. Lily quietly agreed. "And justice." They went up to the apartment. Nick took off his shoes and threw his jacket over the back of the chair with relief. "Tell me how you are," Lily asked, sitting down on the sofa. Nick rubbed his neck tiredly. "How? It's all strange. As if nothing had happened. Work is going on, projects are moving forward. But everyone is whispering behind our backs. Today I heard someone say, 'Will our boss really be eaten alive?' Some employees are worried that the company will collapse without Caldwell." "Collapse?" Lily snorted. "He hasn't been involved in operational work for a long time, just playing the role of frontman. The real work was done by others." "That's right," Nick nodded. "But the legend of Harry's genius is still alive among some, although many seem to be glad to see him go. After all, he crossed many people's paths." Lily looked out the window sadly. "You know, I once believed in this legend too. He knew how to charm." Nick sat down next to her and took her hand. "It's not your fault. He deceived everyone." They sat in silence for a while, huddled close together. Finally, Lily spoke. "Julia Ellerby called me today, that lady from the ceremony, remember? She asked if it was true that we were getting a divorce. I confirmed it. She expressed support, and do you know what she said?" "What?" Nick responded. "Darling, I always knew you deserved better." Lily shook her head. "It seems like a lot of people have suspected Harry's behavior for a long time. Everyone kept quiet out of politeness, and now that everything has come to light, they sympathize with me." Nick smiled slightly. "Well, they're right, you deserve better." Lily smiled gratefully at him and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "And I think I've already received the best." Nick felt warmth from her words and touch. He hugged Lily, and for a while they just sat there, enjoying the silence and closeness. His thoughts were interrupted by Lily's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen and winced. "It's him." Nick froze tensely. Lily looked at the vibrating phone for a few seconds, then picked up the receiver. "Yes, Harry." Harry's voice was distant, but Nick caught the irritated intonations. "I sign the conditions, but I also have information." Lily closed her eyes tiredly. "Speak in action, Harry." Nick saw her listening with her lips pressed together. Then she answered sharply, "No, I don't care. Do whatever you want." The voice on the other end rose. Lily took the phone away from her ear, looking at Nick. "He threatens to ruin my reputation in the media. He will allegedly tell everyone what an unfaithful wife I am, and he will drag you into it." Nick tensed up. "What are we going to do?" Lily shrugged and held the phone up again. Harry, listen up. Do as you wish. But remember, I have facts about your fraud. If you start dumping dirt in public, I'll have to tell you why it all really happened. Is that what you want? Do you think the investors you still hope to get back will approve of your scandals? A shrill stream of accusations came from the receiver. Lily winced, took the phone away, and pressed end call. That's enough for me, she said, turning off the sound. Let him scream into the void. Nick felt anger boiling inside him. If he dares to say even one bad word about you publicly. Lily shook her head and touched his hand. No need, Nick. There's no need to even worry. She tried to smile. Harry always made empty threats. He was used to moral pressure. But now it doesn't work on me. Nick exhaled, calming his anger. You're right. It's really better not to waste a second on him. Lily pressed herself softly against him. Thank you for always standing up for me. You have no idea how much that means. Nick hugged her with both arms. I love you, and I won't let anyone hurt you. Lily closed her eyes, taking those words in. She still had to get used to the fact that there was a person nearby who was sincerely ready to protect her without any conditions. That night, Nick and Lily fell asleep, finally feeling like the hardest part was behind them. A new life lay ahead, without lies, without fear. All that was left was to officially close the old chapter and begin a new one. 3 months after the turbulent events, Lily was officially free. The court approved all the points of the settlement agreement. The Caldwell's marriage was dissolved. The jointly acquired property was divided amicably, mainly the house and several accounts, which Lily gave up to her ex-husband without regret. She did not take any alimony, no compensation, nothing that would bind her to Harry from now on. That day, as Lily walked out of the Austin County Courthouse with the signed papers, she took a deep breath of the spring air. Nick was there, holding her hand. He let go of her hand for a moment to pull a small envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. What is this? Lily asked in surprise. Nick smiled. A small gift on the occasion of freedom. Lily opened the envelope and took out 2 tickets. Taking a closer look, her eyes widened. New York, next week? I thought you could use some fun, Nick explained, his eyes shining. A show on Broadway, museums, Central Park. What do you say? Lily laughed with joy and surprise. I'll say you're crazy, and that it's wonderful. Of course, let's go. He put his arm around her, and they walked together to the car. Now that it's all over, Nick said on the way, tell me more about one thing. That night, you reminded Harry about the trust. I honestly didn't understand everything. Your father invested in Caldwell Frontier. Lily nodded. Yes, I don't think I've ever told you about this. When Harry and I first met, his company was in its early stages. My father was a wealthy man, you know, in the oil business. He was looking for new investments at the time, and through friends he learned about Harry's startup fund. He invested a large sum, but did it all through a family trust, of which I am the beneficiary. That's amazing, Nick drawled. So you had a stake in Harry's business from the start. Technically, it was a trust, Lily clarified. I didn't interfere. My father died, the trust came under my management, but the financiers are still handling it. Harry always acted as if it was his entire company, but in fact, almost a third of the fund's capital is my trust. It turns out that now, after the divorce, your share remains with you, and his position is even weaker, Nick noted. Lily chuckled slightly. Exactly. He lost his position, and his influence has fallen. Of course, he remains a co-owner, he has his share, but my voice is now independent. If it comes to selling or reorganizing Caldwell Frontier, my word will be weighty. Nick turned onto a familiar street. What are you going to do with this share? Lily thought, looking out the window at the trees running past. I haven't decided yet. Perhaps I'll sell my share to other partners to close this chapter once and for all. Or maybe, on the contrary, I'll leave it and make sure that the business I once helped save develops honestly. She turned to him with a slight smile. Do you think I will become an impartial shareholder? Nick smiled back. You will be great at whatever you decide to do. Lily squeezed his hand on the gearbox. You know, I feel like I've been born again. For the first time in a long time, I can choose what to do next. That's amazing. You have so many opportunities ahead of you, Nick agreed. He parked at his apartment building. They walked upstairs, discussing their plans for a trip to New York. Lily wanted to go to a concert and take an early morning stroll through Central Park. Nick joked about taking her to the best brunch in the West Village. As they entered the apartment, Lily suddenly stopped in the living room, looking around. Her gaze fell on the corner where Nick's guitar stood. "Will you play me something?" she asked unexpectedly. Nick was embarrassed. I haven't done anything for a long time, and I'm not a professional at all." "Please." Lily came closer and took his arm, looking pleadingly. "I want to hear it so much." Nick couldn't refuse. He took the guitar and sat down on the couch. Lily settled down next to him, her legs tucked under her, an expectant look on her face. "I don't know many songs," he warned, "and I sing badly, to be honest." "I don't care," she smiled. Nick tuned the strings and began to pluck them softly. He chose a simple, melodic John Denver song that he often sang to himself. In a quiet baritone, he sang about the road home, about peace and love. Lily listened, hugging her knees with her hands and closing her eyes. As the last chords faded, she moved closer and kissed Nick tenderly. "Thank you," Lily whispered. "That was wonderful." Nick put the guitar back, hugging her. "For you, anything." Lily pressed her cheek against his chest. "You know, I lived in a cage for so long without even noticing. And now, it's like I've got wings." "Straighten them out," Nick said softly, stroking her back. "I'll be there and fly with you." Lily sat there, feeling the warmth of his embrace, thinking about how far they had come. A year ago, she had been living a lie and saw no way out. And now, here was a man she could trust with all her heart. All the losses and pain she had endured had led her to this moment, and she didn't regret a single decision. Nick had been the one worth risking everything for. "I love you," Lily said quietly, pressing her shoulder against Nick's. Nick smiled and kissed the top of her head. "I love you too, Lily." At that moment, Lily's phone blinked silently, a news alert. The headline of an economics website about a reshuffle at Caldwell Frontier Capital flashed across the screen. Lily glanced briefly and turned off the screen with a clear conscience, without reading the details. She no longer cared about business news or her ex-husband's name. All that mattered was here and now in a quiet, cozy evening with Nick. A few more months flew by. Life gradually returned to a calm course. Lily and Nick returned from a short vacation in New York, full of impressions. Lily began to reorganize her affairs. She resumed work in the charitable foundations that she had previously led and began to appear more often at social events in a new status, not as the wife of a famous investor, but as an independent figure. One warm Saturday evening, Lily and Nick found themselves at the Bluffton Museum charity ball again, the same one where their story began almost a year ago. This time, everything was different. Lily herself was one of the organizers of the evening, and Nick accompanied her openly as her official partner. As they entered the glittering hall, the music was already playing, and the guests were circling in their finery. Many knew Lily and greeted her with smiles and nods. She looked dazzling in an elegant silver dress, her hair falling freely over her shoulders. Nick, holding her arm, was proud and pleased to see her confident and happy. "Are you nervous?" he whispered in her ear, feeling the slight tremor of her hand. "A little," Lily admitted, "but it's a pleasant excitement. Today I'm here on my own, not someone's shadow." Nick shook her hand gently. "You've always been yourself, and now everyone can see it." Mrs. Ellerby, the philanthropic old lady, came up to them and greeted Lily warmly, kissing her on the cheek. "Lily, my dear, you are beaming," said Mrs. Ellerby. "How glad I am to see you. And Mr. Mason, isn't it?" "Yes, hello," Nick smiled, nodding slightly. He was now familiar with many of Lily's friends and felt quite confident in their circle. Mrs. Ellerby squeezed Lily's hand meaningfully. "I'm so happy for you, darling. You made the right choice." Lily nodded gratefully. Thank you, Julia, for your support too. The lady retreated to join the other guests, and Lily and Nick moved on. Everywhere people exchanged a few words with Lily. Some asked about the recent exhibition she had helped organize. Others congratulated her on the new chapter in her life. Nick spotted a friend at one of the tables, Peter Hall, the PR guy he had spoken to at the TechVision Awards that busy evening. Peter raised his glass in greeting. Nick led Lily to meet him. Peter smiled. Nice to see you, Nick. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the same Lily Brooks. Brooks again now, I suppose. Lily nodded with a slight laugh. Yes, I officially took back my maiden name. Congratulations, Peter said more seriously. You look great together. Nick's a great guy. I'm happy for him. Thank you, they answered almost in chorus, looking at each other with a smile. As Peter walked away, familiar soft music began to play. A jazz ensemble began a dance program. The host announced the first slow dance. Lily turned to Nick, her eyes sparkling mischievously. Shall we dance, Mr. Mason? Nick bowed with feigned politeness. With pleasure, Miss Brooks. They walked out onto the dance floor among other couples. Nick put his arm around Lily's waist. She put her hand on his shoulder. The music flowed softly, and they moved to the beat. Do you remember how we danced here a year ago? Lily asked quietly. Of course I remember, Nick smiled. Then I tried to support you as best I could, and at the same time hide how much I liked you. Lily giggled quietly. And I tried to hide how much I wanted you to hug me tighter. Nick pressed her a little closer. Now there is no need to hide. Not anymore, she echoed. They swayed in the dance, forgetting about everyone around them. Nick looked into Lily's shining eyes, and his heart was overflowing with love and gratitude for every moment that brought them to this moment. I love you, he suddenly said quietly. Lily flashed a smile and answered without a moment's hesitation. I love you too, Nick. These words sounded like music to them, even louder than the orchestra. It seemed as if the whole hall was disappearing, leaving only the two of them. When the melody ended, Lily and Nick stopped, but did not break their embrace. Several couples nearby applauded the musicians, and at the same time applauded them, perceiving their shining faces as part of a beautiful scene. Nick laughed, slightly embarrassed and happy. Lily leaned her forehead against his cheek for a moment, whispering, Thank you for being there. Thank you, he answered softly, for trusting me. Soon it was time for the official part of the evening. The host took the microphone and announced, Ladies and gentlemen, our honorary organizer and sponsor of today's ball, Miss Lily Brooks, has the floor to greet us. There was applause. Lily, smiling slightly shyly, let go of Nick's hand and walked to the microphone in the center of the room. Nick watched, holding his breath, how confident and elegant she held herself. Dear friends, Lily began, her voice firm and warm. Thank you for being with us today, supporting the museum and the arts in our city. This evening is special to me. A year ago, I was here in a different role, and honestly, I felt lost. Now, I am happy to stand before you, knowing that there are people with kind hearts around us, ready to help the community and each other. She looked around the room with gratitude, and many smiled back at her. Let this evening be a celebration not only of charity, but also of faith in new beginnings, Lily continued. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the organization of the ball. I wish you a wonderful time and inspiration. The guests applauded loudly and for a long time. Lily, blushing with excitement, returned to Nick. He immediately handed her a glass of champagne. You were magnificent, he whispered when the noise died down. I was terribly worried, she admitted quietly. Not a bit noticeable, Nick smiled. Lily sighed with relief and clinked glasses of champagne with him. To new beginnings. To you, Nick replied and took a sip. They returned to the table for glasses of water. They still had a long, wonderful evening ahead of them, no longer hiding their feelings, enjoying every moment together. The day before, Nick had secretly bought a ring and had been restless all day, preparing for the big question. He knew he couldn't live peacefully without asking Lily to become his wife. That evening, Nick took Lily for a walk along Lady Bird Lake. The sun was slowly setting, painting the sky and water in golden pink hues. Lily walked barefoot along the warm wooden boardwalk, holding her shoes in her hands and laughing. "I think I'm a little too dressed up for such a spontaneous stroll today." She was wearing a light blue dress that fluttered beautifully in the breeze. Nick was also dressed more than usual, in a summer linen jacket and light trousers. He was nervous and tried to hide it, maintaining a casual conversation about the recent news. Lily said that she had decided to leave her share of Caldwell Frontier for a while and take a closer look at the work of the new management. Mark Reynolds seemed to justify the investors' trust, and the scandal with Harry was gradually being forgotten. "He went to California, by the way," she mentioned. "They say he's trying to start some kind of consulting business there, but with a reputation like that, it won't be easy for him." Nick nodded. "I think it's better to leave the past behind. Let him live as he pleases." Lily smiled. "I absolutely agree." They stopped at the railing, where they had a beautiful view of the lake. In the distance, they could see the lights of downtown Austin's high-rises. A few swans glided along the water, and a group of young people laughed at a picnic nearby. Nick took a deep breath. His heart was pounding. This was the perfect moment. "Lily," he said, turning to face her. "HM," she turned to him too, admiring the reflection of the setting sun in his eyes. Nick was speechless for a second from her beauty and the love that filled his chest. But he managed, took her free hand in his. "We've been through so much this year," he began quietly. "Sometimes it feels like this is some kind of movie, but this is our life. And I've never been happier than I am right now with you." Lily smiled tenderly. "Me too." "You changed my whole life," Nick continued. "You made me better, stronger. I'm proud of you and admire you every day." Lily's eyes sparkled. Nick. His fingers found the small velvet box in his pocket that he had been hiding all evening. His heart leapt into his throat, but he felt his legs buckle with excitement, and he dropped to one knee right there on the wooden platform, looking up at Lily. Lily gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. The shoes fell from her other hand, but she didn't pay attention. "Lily Brooks," Nick said, opening the box. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled, caught in the sunset. "You're the love of my life. Marry me." For a few moments, Lily seemed petrified with amazement. Then a smile blossomed on her face, and tears of joy welled up in her eyes. "Yes." She exhaled barely audibly, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." Nick felt incredibly relieved and happy at the same time. Lily helped him up, and he put the ring on her finger with a slightly trembling hand. It fit perfectly. Lily laughed through her tears, hugging him around the neck. "Nick, oh my God, I didn't expect." "In a good way?" he asked with a smile, hugging her tightly. "In the best possible way," she confirmed and kissed him, long and tenderly, to the applause of random passers by who noticed this scene. Their faces were beaming with joy as Nick picked her up and spun her around a couple of times, unable to contain his delight. Lily let out a joyful cry and laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. They were both like children, enjoying this moment, feeling that their most cherished dream was coming true. When they broke away from each other, both were happy and slightly embarrassed by the attention of a couple of strollers who were waving at them and shouting congratulations. Nick kissed the tear on Lily's cheek. "You made me the happiest person." "And you make me the happiest," she replied. Some time later, when the evening had finally turned into a warm night, Nick and Lily were walking back to the car, holding hands. Lily kept looking at the new ring on her finger, and her gaze was filled with amazement and happiness. "Well, well," she said in a low voice, "I'm a bride again." Nick laughed quietly. "Get used to it, you'll be a wife soon." Lily stopped and gently pulled him towards her by the hand. "Do you think we're not in a hurry? Maybe people will say it's not even been a year since my divorce." Nick touched her face gently. "Let them say what they want. Only we know what we've been through, and I'm absolutely sure of my decision." Lily smiled, casting aside her last doubts. "And I'm sure." They moved toward the car again. The night around was quiet, only the grasshoppers chirped in the grass, and the highway rustled somewhere in the distance. Nick suddenly said, "Let's call Sam right now and tell him. He'll be beside himself with joy." Lily snorted. "Poor guy, he almost told me about your plans at the party last night. I barely held back. We'll definitely call. And your friend Jessica too," Nick chimed in. "And by tomorrow morning, I'm sure all of Austin will know." "So be it," Lily pressed herself against his hand. "We're not hiding anything anymore." Reaching the car, Nick, before getting in, pulled Lily towards him again and kissed her under the light of the street lamp. "Let's go home, my bride," he said warmly. "Let's go, my future husband," she responded with a smile. 6 months later, in a small chapel on a hill overlooking the lake, Nick and Lily exchanged vows in the presence of their closest friends. It was a modest but incredibly warm ceremony. Lily wore a delicate white knee-length dress, with a wreath of wildflowers in her hair. Nick wore a light suit. Smiling friends stood nearby. Sam was the groom's best man, and Lily's longtime friend was the bride's. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Nick lifted Lily's veil and kissed her to the applause of those present, to the joyful cries of "Hooray!" and the rustle of hundreds of soap bubbles that the guests blew instead of rice. The sun was shining brightly, the skies were cloudless, as if the universe itself blessed their union. Lily closed her eyes for a moment as Nick placed the engagement ring on her finger as they exchanged vows. She felt as if her parents were invisibly present somewhere nearby. Her father, who had once invested that very share of the company in her future, and her mother, who had always wanted her to be happy. It was as if their blessing had been like the warmth of the sun on this day. Lily felt that she had finally found the family she had dreamed of. The room, decorated with simple wild flowers and garlands of lights, was filled with joy and family comfort. Sam, taking the microphone, made a cheerful toast. "I've known Nick for 10 years now, and I've never seen him as happy as he is with Lily. They're the perfect team. They've been through thick and thin together. Here's to the new Mason Brooks family. Hooray!" The guests supported the toast with a friendly hooray and a loud clinking of glasses. Lily and Nick, sitting next to each other at the festive table, smiled shyly and thanked everyone. After the ceremony, late in the evening, the newlyweds slipped away from their guests for a few minutes to rest on the terrace of a small chapel house. From there was a stunning view of the sunset over the lake. Lily, holding Nick's hand, said quietly, "Remember, we were standing by the lake the day you proposed to me. The sunset is just as beautiful today." Nick hugged her shoulders, pressing her to himself. "I thought then that I couldn't be happier. It turned out that I could." Lily sighed happily. "We have our whole life ahead of us, and I know it will be happy." Nick touched the tip of his nose to hers in a playful gesture. "Because we are together. Because we are together," she confirmed, looking into his eyes. Downstairs, they heard calls from the guests calling them to cut the wedding cake. Lily and Nick exchanged smiles and headed back inside, knowing that this day was just the beginning of a new chapter. Saying goodbye to their bachelor life and past mistakes, they looked only forward. They shared another kiss, now as husband and wife, and walked slowly down the stairs toward their new life, hand in hand. What had begun as a risky secret romance had become a strong union of two loving hearts. And as Nick and Lily stepped back toward their friends and family, hand in hand, they both knew that whatever fate would bring, they would face it together, with love and confidence in each other. Soon the newlyweds left the party to the joyful cries of the guests. A car decorated with ribbons with the inscription, "Just Married," was waiting for them. Nick got behind the wheel, Lily waved goodbye to her friends, and the car moved off towards the sunset. Ahead of them was a honeymoon and a whole life long, happy and full of love. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.